Hello and welcome. My name is Taylor Payton, and I will be guiding you through this process on how to draw and giving you 5 general tips. The tips are right here, and we will go through a demonstration using each and every one of them so that we can begin to help augment your drawing journey. So without further ado, I'm going to just talk about each of these points in just a quick fashion, and then we'll get to some drawing. So first and foremost, you want to go in with an intent. If you don't have an intent, then you're going to noodle, you're going to doodle, and it's fine for experimenting, it's fine for, catharsis and that sort of thing. But if you don't have an intent, your results are always going to be muddy or hazy. So you have to have that up front in order to maximize the chance that you're going to create a drawing that you're happy with and that has a focus to it, which we'll sort of touch on in number 3. Number 2 is look up reference. For me, I grabbed this picture from Boston Dynamics of their robot Atlas. They have an amazing YouTube channel wherein they showcase some of the best mechanical engineering that I've personally ever seen. So check them out. I'll leave a link to the description box, or in the description box of their stuff. And I'm going to be using this robot as reference because it's based on real world technology that actually works. And I really want to create a design that feels like it could work. So that's what I'm going to be using this reference for. Next, you want to figure out your focal point, and I'll talk a little more about the focal point as I'm drawing. But first and foremost, you want to ensure that the focal point is something that you set pretty early on in the process. I'd say maybe at your 10 or 15% mark of any given drawing or practice session. And the focal point is just the point you choose to focus on the most. It usually has the most detail or contrast. Lastly, you want to practice deliberately, meaning we're getting away from that noodly doodly sort of exploratory feeling which most artists default to. And again, having a deliberate sense about it. So if you want to get better at drawing robots, draw a lot of robots, understand the pieces and parts and anatomy and some of the mechanical engineering. If you want to draw animals, understand the biology and the shape design. And practice those things over and over and over like you would if you were in karate practicing your kicks, I think Bruce Lee said something to the effect of, I don't fear the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks, I fear the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times. And, that applies to girls as well, obviously. But basically all that he is saying is that you have to get deliberate with your practice. If you spread yourself, doing one kick 1,000 times over, you will have gotten closer to mastery in that one kick, and that is 1,000 times more powerful than doing 1,000 different kicks and having really poor form in all of them. Lastly, we're going to build on basics. Basics are so essential. They are the foundational precepts and principles that masters before us have laid down, and I'm always a huge proponent of them because they work. If you want to know more about basics, I have links to some of my other beginner drawing course and beginner drawing course light videos in the description box, and you can check that out. But for now, let's get to some drawing. So I'm going to move those out of the way, put Atlas over here, and zoom in a little bit. Let's make a new layer and begin our intent. So first and foremost, we want to draw some robots and we want to understand a little more about them. So in this case, I'm going to spend a little bit of time observing. It's a very low resolution image, or I kind of crunched it down for the video. So I'm just looking at some of the pieces and parts. What are the big shapes? What are the smaller shapes? It's obviously humanoid, so that's good. I have a lot of knowledge of human design and anatomy, so that's going to aid me in this quest. And I already have connections between what I know and what I'm trying to create, which is sort of a little bonus tip there. If you already have expertise in a certain area or, some adept feeling, then you can kind of ride on that. So let's just start by figuring out some of our larger shapes. I'm not going to copy Atlas's shapes exactly, but I'm going to be drawing a front view of the robot. And I'm going to just set my intention, again, for drawing that robot and for creating a focal point thereafter. So in terms of deliberate practice, I'll probably sketch a couple different robots just so you can see. And none of these drawings are going to be super refined because I just want to kind of enunciate the tips for you. I kind of just continue to drive those home throughout the video so that you can really see all of these tips kind of working, and you can apply them to your own art, whether it's, like I said, robots, dragons, goblins, whatever you really want to get to drawing. So in this case, this head I kind of understand. It to me feels like, there's sort of a little module up here that probably is some sort of camera. I don't I haven't looked into the full anatomy of this design, but this is more of like the motor aspects that are probably in the core here. Much like in our own bodies, we have all of our organs pretty much situated in our torso area. So you kind of want to figure out that if you're drawing a humanoid robot, then most of the pieces are going to be in that realm. And I think as I'm getting clear on my intention here, which is always a good thing, I want to take this design and I want to make it feel even a little more humanoid, a little less robot. So I'm going to be taking and merging my knowledge of human anatomy and my knowledge that I'm gaining of sort of dynamic, mechanically engineered robot anatomy, and turning that into these drawings and trying to communicate that and learn at the same time. Drawing is one of the absolute best tools, in my opinion, for learning, because you are grasping the overall visuals of something and making it into something that you can understand and have a much more intimate knowledge of by replicating and kind of combining, I think that's a word, combining the shapes that you already know and can utilize. So I'm going to keep the pose pretty basic, pretty static. I just want to replicate some of those shapes and on that note, kind of the bigger shapes. It looks like the center of gravity, the center of mass, is usually the torso. That's our connector to our ground plane, which you can't see, but it's pretty much like that. It's something that you can stand on. And I'm not going to draw it yet for this particular design, but I am going to keep it in mind as I think about where my feet are going to go. Basically, as I'm getting clear on my intention of hybridizing some of our anatomical prowess and some robotic anatomy, I know that the head is going to be a little closer to home, and it will still need some room to turn, so I'll cut out a piece of that front plate, kind of have some areas where the neck could be attached to the head. Now, I don't know if you can hear that cicada in the background, but that thing is going off. 'Tis the summer, so basically you have your intention, you have your reference that you're always drawing from, and now it's about time to figure out a focal point. So as far as the focal point goes for this one, I really want the overall design, like the full picture read, to be the focal point, just because that is essentially what my reference is. So I'm going to try and create a strong, basic, seemingly feasible design that maybe could even make for a really early rough sketch before figuring out some of the more engineering aspects of this particular design. So I'm just thinking about the shapes and how they would actually make for very good elements to create actual movement, actual dynamism. And I'm seeing these longer cylinders kind of extruded out from the core here. Again, I don't have, at this point in my career, a vast swath of mechanical engineering knowledge, so this is a learning process for me as well, and that is where deliberate practice comes in. I'm practicing deliberately not only to draw more feasible robots, but to understand more about mechanical engineering and robotics in general. So in this case, I'm using it more as a learning tool than I am for creating, really finished drawings or designs. But that to me is vital. It's the sketching prowess. It's how to draw. And these general tips will allow you to ascend in understanding way, way better as you begin to kind of get clearer and clearer on your focal points and what you should be practicing more deliberately. So I'm drawing some hip joints right now. I'm thinking about how the legs are going to be positioned, taking into account these different pieces of the torso. And there's a really thin aspect right here, and I know that it works because there's a lot of stresses and strains that this part right here can probably withstand due to the way that it's been engineered and designed. Mine is still fairly hazy, so I'm going to delete that piece and instead go for more similar design to what they've done with that Atlas model. Just a couple different breakups of shapes, thinking of the ways in which it can move on different axes. And that looks a little more viable to me, so I'm going to move on to the legs. Nothing has to be perfect, I'm just trying to get deliberate with what I'm doing. So that is usually the key here. For example, if you've ever looked at some of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches, and I will definitely be doing a video kind of talking about and breaking down some of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches, a lot of them are really not that polished or refined or finished. And I think that that's so beautiful, because no matter what you're endeavoring to do, you have to start a little more vague, start a little more explorational. You know, it's really about just getting something down that you can then refine. Speaking of refine, I'm going to kind of make the design a little bit smaller so I can fit it on the picture plane here. Started drawing a little too large. And I'm going to work my way down to the feet so we have connection to that aforementioned ground plane. So I usually start with some simple lines to kind of flesh out where the direction is going to be heading in terms of the part or piece of anatomy or element or component, whatever you'd like to call it, and then I will kind of flesh out everything around that line. You could also call it the line of action or the line of placement. Lines are one of the artist's greatest tools and best friends on the picture plane, because everything comes back to drawing, and everything kind of comes back to line when you're drawing. There's mark making, you know, there's creating lots of marks, but those are just a bunch of little lines that add up to one composite thing. It's a little bit like a math equation or a chord made out of notes. Anyway, so now that I have a pretty good idea of where the legs are going to go, it's time to get down to the feet. I really like the foot design on this, so I'm not going to alter it too much. I think we'll just stick with those nice basic shapes. And now we have a standing mechanical figure. It's time to finalize, at least for this drawing, some of the other components, like the forearms and the hands. In this case, Atlas seems to have, I have no idea what those are. I will have to see if there's a better breakdown on the website. But I am going to just kind of simplify, because this tutorial is not about hands, it's about giving you 5 general drawing tips. But basically, I'm just going in with these really rough shapes, these little diamonds or sideways squares, if you want to call them that, and just kind of altering and chamfering those corners so they're not as sharp. And that's a pretty good basic hand shape. I don't think I need to mess with it more than that. But yeah, that's essentially just building on the basics. And so the basics are all lines and shapes, and if you again want to know more about those basics, feel free to check out the beginner drawing course and the beginner drawing course light. You will have a stronger knowledge of which shapes you can deploy and at which junctures you should deploy them. But you're going to need to learn those shapes and get them into your visual library if you are to build from the basics. So now we have this nice, simple, standing mechanical figure. And it almost seems feasible to build. Like, you could take, and if you had a knowledge of mechanical engineering, probably route all the various items and all the various artifacts and pieces through this core and torso and get them to move through, similar to how Boston Dynamics has. And again, those are a bunch of phenomenal scientists and engineers, I'm sure, over there. I will probably do way more research after this video, just because right now I'm really into mechanical engineering and design and industrial design. So I find that sketching things like this really aids me in getting that emotional component down in the deliberate practice realm. Another thing to figure out is sort of the face. We've left it pretty blank, and that could stand some, detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in by one zoom unit here. I'm a little out of depth as far as the zoom goes because I'm at 200%. It's going to look a little pixely. I apologize for that, but it's time to kind of get an idea of what some of the items in the head could be. So there could be like a camera straight down the middle so it can see where it's going. And that's, you know, if you've ever looked into the front part of a camera, there's like the aperture and the shutter, which has its own geometry inside of it. But a simple circle with some, you know, inferred detail is fine. Maybe there's a subdivision between the head top and the head bottom so it can rotate along the axis, and then I'll just add some design lines to help smooth out some of the features and the geometry. Sometimes I like to think that I would 3D model something like this, and if that were the case, it would be it behooves you to kind of think about the overall three-dimensionality of the form, again building off basics. So now we've kind of run through in the broadest sense our general drawing tips. I'm going to bring them back up and just go over them quickly so that you can again inculcate this information. The best way to do that is by applying, by the way, so please don't just watch the video. After you're done with this, practice each and every one of these as you go through your sketchbook or as you're trying to learn something. I'm not just doing these videos for my good health. I'm doing these videos so that you can have a greater understanding of how to ascend in drawing ability and giving you 5 general drawing tips to help you do that. But essentially, we went with our intent right away, and that gave us a strong result. I'm going to save real quick so I don't lose it. It's going to be G-Robot because that is the typo I made. So go with the intent, look up your reference, and I had mine ready and handy. Figure out your focal point. In this case, it was the entirety of the design, which I kept in mind, and that looks good and solid, so I'm happy with that. Practice deliberately, so build off something you really want to understand and do it over and over and over. Even though you only see me doing this once, I have sketchbooks full of stuff like this because it's something that I'm genuinely interested in and I want to understand more and more. I have Pinterest boards dedicated to different engineering principles, especially mechanical, and I will sketch some of the parts, components, and assemblies in that board just because I want that deliberate practice. Next, you want to build on basics. So some of the basics are, say, like line, shape, geometry, and you know, stuff like that. It's really a bit too deep for the scope of this video, but again, I left you with a lot of good information in the description box as far as following up on some of the videos I've already done on basics for drawing. And I think this is a good point to sort of wrap it up. I'm happy with the overall design, and I feel like we got through these general tips really nicely. If you're having trouble with drawing, then you can just let me know in the not the description box, in the comment section, and I will do my best to make another drawing video helping to address the points that you're struggling with. If I don't know what you guys in the community are having a problem with, then I have a hard time making videos about it. But thankfully I have done some research on various forums and subreddits and stuff, and I have a list of things that I'm going to be working through. This is just the general drawing video I made to kind of help build momentum in that process. Anyhow, thank you for watching. If you'd like, check out artmaxion.com. Again, link in the description box. I have tons of tutorials, courses, and other things to help you ascend in your drawing practice and potential. I am always grateful for subscriptions, likes, all that good stuff. I will never tell you what to do. You are your own autonomous human being, and if you really like something, if it really resonates with you, then you will go ahead and pursue it further. Other than that, I just want to say thank you for watching. Again, I'm Taylor Payton, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and happy creating.